know.
I know.
I don't even see where the
So it doesn't make
microphone
any
is on
sense.
this. You know, like,
It's there.
it looks like a
It's
flash
that little
button.
dot or something.
The little dot.
Yeah.
Let me get there and we'll go.
Okay, I believe we are ready to resume. Julie, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. So I'll just start where I left off, unless you'd like me to backtrack a little bit. Sure. Okay, so as I was saying, this site was previously surveyed for archaeological resources when it was subdivided in 2005. So there's no concern with potential resources on the site. Still, the standard discovery clause is recommended to be in conformance with county code. So finally, there is going to be a limit in terms of the number of persons that can be on this site per day, and that's really because of the size of the septic system that's being constructed. So there is condition 17, which limits the capacity of the site to 30 persons per day. So that will at least, make it so it's a pretty minimal in terms of impact for having less than 30 people there every day. So. With regards to natural resources, there are two identified environmentally sensitive habitat areas on the parcel. There's the Bishop Pine Forest, which you can see in this image here shown in the blue. And then there is also riparian vegetation, which is shown with the green, which you can just see, and there's buffers set around that. There's activities in the Isha buffer areas, but those are very limited, and they're going to be the project will be utilizing the existing skid trails from past logging activities on the site, so there's going to be very minimal impact in those areas, just brushing to clean up the trails and such and make them accessible for people. So recommendations have been made by the project biologist to reduce any potential impacts from both the development of the trails as well as the spreading of the cremated remains. So you will see there's conditions 11, 12, and 13 within the report that are intended to address natural resource protections. So after preparing the initial study, staff has determined that this project will have a less than significant impact on the environment and recommends adoption of a negative declaration. And this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for staff?
Sure. Do we need an exception for the height for the tower?
No, actually, because there is already set up in our code an allowance for additional height for structures such as this.
Up to 100 feet or something?
Yeah, but this is only going to be about 35 feet, so it's not too concerning about that. So, and I'm sorry, I will need to just backtrack here and note that we did receive 2 different phone calls on this item as well. So one was from Bill Keller with the Independent Coast Observer, who was just interested about the project. I believe he was writing an article about this project. And the second was from an adjacent landowner named Susan Crutcher. She's the owner of the parcel at 44290 Schooner Gulch Road. And that parcel is about 1.6 miles from this project site. So she was mainly wanting to express that she was concerned about this project coming into a residential rural area. And also had felt that the county had played this pretty close to the vest, that she didn't feel like there was a lot of public notice provided for this item, as well as the Gualala Municipal Advisory Council had not reviewed it. And I'll just address both of those, that Ms. Crutcher's parcel falls outside of the required noticing boundaries for this type of project. And the project site is not within the GMAC review boundaries. So that is why neither one of those occurred. There is always a notice posted at the bottom of the driveway. That's what's required through the coastal development permit process. That's to notify the public when an application's been filed. But there is no requirement for us to notice that otherwise, and a notice was posted in the newspaper as well. So I think that concludes mine.
Any further questions of staff?
Julia, I have a question on condition number 17, and you did address it 30 persons per day. At the time, I was thinking, well, maybe that would be for one service, and if there was more than one service, could there be 2 in a day? And I was concerned that if there was, 25 that showed up at one and 20 at the other, that would be more than the 30 people. Maybe maybe it's not an issue, but I just thought it should be addressed in case in the future.
Sure, I mean, how the condition's written right now would just, it's keeping that cap at 30 persons per day. That was when the septic designer designed the system, said that it could not handle more than that on a daily basis. So the applicant is well aware of that constraint and is going to make sure that the property is operated in conformance with that requirement. But you know, certainly if the commission so wishes, we could add additional clarity on that condition about limiting the number of services or something to be held per day.
But the applicant is agreeable to that, 30 per day?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Any other comments or questions? If not, we'd like to hear from the applicant, if the applicant would care to speak.
My name's Jamie Knowlton. I'm one of the co-founders of Better Place Forest, and I just wanted to thank you all for having me here today and for hearing our application. As Julia alluded to, at Better Place Forest, what we're doing is we're providing the first natural and protected option for the 65% of Californians who choose cremation by allowing them to spread their ashes around a protected redwood tree in the forest. And not only do we provide a beautiful option for people to return their ashes to the earth naturally, but we also help to conserve land in the process by turning it into a conservation area. We're extremely excited to establish our first conservation spreading forest here in the county of Mendocino, and also honored to help to be able to protect the redwoods. So, thank you very much.
Any questions for the applicant? Yes.
Yes, I have one. You mentioned 65% cremation in California, and at a redwood site, or is that total cremation?
That's the gross cremation rate for the state of California today, and it's rising every day, but there are really no kind of desirable options as to where to place one's ashes currently available.
Okay, thank you.
And just to your other question about the visitation on a daily basis, we totally understand the limit of 30 per day, and if there were multiple services that were to be planned in a given day, we would actually manage the bookings such that we would ensure that there wouldn't be more than the allowed limit of people per day, such that if one service was 25, say, and the other one wanted to be 20, then we would schedule them on different days.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? We could open the public hearing now. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any questions, comments?
I don't have any problem with it. I'll make a motion. I move the recommended motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Ogles?
Yes.
Commissioner Hall?
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Warner?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kruger?
Yes.
Chair Holtkamp?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. We will now move to case U 2017-0013.
Good morning, Planning Commissioners. My name is Jesse Davis. I'm the planner through here with Mendocino County. Today I'm presenting to you U 2017-0013. This is a use permit to formalize an existing room and board in two on-site dwelling units. Bedroom 1 would comprise the entirety of the adjacent dwelling unit, while bedroom 2 would be a partitioned bedroom within the owner-occupied dwelling unit. Both would be rented on a short-term basis after facilitation of this use permit. The owners have indicated that they will be on the premises full-time while the guests are present. Furthermore, the applicant's statement and site characteristics, I believe, are well defined and very well explained. I encourage review of that document, and I'm sure the applicant will speak further to their operation. Surrounding land use and zoning is entirely in line for room and board with requiring of a use permit. Parcels surrounding the subject parcel are zoned as upland residential 20. All are rather large sites of 20 acres or more. Access to this site is through a private road, Metzler Ranch Road. As you know, this use permit is only required if the parcel does not have frontage on a publicly maintained road. While the parcel is adjacent to Sherwood Road, CR number 322, access is taken from Metzler Ranch Road, Metzler Ridge Road, excuse me, which is private, thereby requiring this use permit. Any nuisances that have been or will be presented, we believe to be mitigated through conditions 8 through 14. Like most projects occurring on private roads, transportation and traffic are perhaps the biggest concern. However, after review, this project site does not seem to indicate any more significant issues with transportation or traffic, given the limited operations on site. Furthermore, in reviewing the conditions, like other use permits for short-term rentals on our inland side, we've set sort of allocations around guest limits, as well as camping, special events and large celebratory gatherings, signage, parking, noise, campfires. The one comment that was received for this project was from our county addresser. His one comment was that the site be clearly marked and addressed for individuals who are coming. Again, there should be no signage further advertising this business, but clearly marked addresses were a comment of the county addresser. Otherwise, I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Any questions for staff? Go ahead.
Just one on
Of course.
the last page of the conditions. They're just really correcting things. Item number 9, or condition number 9, I think at the end of that should say residential structures with an S, because I think we're talking about 2 structures.
That is correct. There are 2 residential structures on site, both a permitted accessory dwelling unit as well as a single-family residence. I believe that's a rather straightforward correction. Thank you.
And then condition number 17, the applicant shall, I think it's finalized and received, not finalized.
On condition 17?
I'm sorry, 19.
Oh, 19.
Yes.
Thank you. That is well corrected.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. One, this permit is kind of expensive, and does it need renewing?
With regards to this use permit, it does not need to be annually renewed. This use permit is the cost that is presented currently.
So no renewal is necessary unless it's not
exactly
in use for.
Or there is a modification to the use permit that would thereby sort of change the use, which would require a review and use permit modification. There would be a fee associated with that.
And then, included in the information, there is a copy of the Planning and Building Services receipt. And there's a pay method, and it shows a credit number. I hope that's not a credit card number.
It should not be. I don't believe so.
No.
This project, and thank you for that question, Molly. So, Commissioner, this project did receive a limited refund based on direction from the Board of Supervisors to reduce the conditional review of similar projects for room and board or short-term rentals from a major to a minor use permit. There is still a conditional review. We were able to refund applicants who had applied for use permits to a limited extent under Planning and Building Services. We're still examining whether additional refunds are possible. At this stage, though, a minor use permit cost is the cost moving forward for use permits for room and board and other short-term rentals on our inland zoning division.
Good. Thank you for the information.
Any further questions for staff? We'd like to hear from the applicant now.
Good morning, I'm Joy Polonico, owner of the parcel in question for this short, vacation rental business. I have a few points to make to the commission that have been rather disturbing to me through this whole process. I have received no indication in writing or any notification that my major use permit application was changed from major to minor. And as of now, I only have paperwork that's going to make it go forward in the future as a major permit. Jesse's words are the first indication that there has been some action on that formally. All I received to show me that there was some action on that was a $761 check issued December 15th, 6 weeks ago. I did not know what it was for. It wasn't identified in any way. So I called the tax collector, and they did not know what it was for either, and referred me back to planning and building, in which case I found out that that was partial refund from the major use permit down to minor. And that was all the money I was going to receive in that whole process. I was a little disturbed by that because I've met with Supervisor Krosky twice. I've had a lot of communication with her over this whole process. And I understood that the whole cost to do this minor use permit would be around $1,000, which is a huge reduction from the $5,500 that it has cost me to get to this point with the Planning and Building Department. I started this business in June of 2016. I immediately went down and filed a DBA, got the business permit, paid $130 to Planning and Building for the review, which is customary for all businesses. And I was issued a business license. So I was thrilled because I had just filed what I was told I needed to go through a major use permit to do this micro business that grosses no more than $18,000 a year. And that was a very offensive thing to me, to see that this was all going on and I was caught in the middle of it. I really think that the cost to do a micro business in this county should not cost an individual, particularly a 70-year-old retiree who's doing this for supplemental income. This is punitive and it's outrageous. And I'm now facing what they say is a 2-year review, or renew this business license in 2 years with a $2,000 price tag. I can't believe this is happening in this county. I think it's outrageous. And I think that the commission needs to take a look at this closely and see what's going on and maybe develop another category for people who are seniors or people who are doing micro businesses and adjust the fees accordingly so that we have a chance, because you're discouraging business. And I think something needs to be done about it, and you people are the ones in a position to make those changes. This process that I've been through in a year and a half, I can't believe it's taken 18 months to get from the time I filed that original review for $130 with the planning department to now. And guess what? They took away my business license. They said, no, now that we know about your major use permit filing, you have to go through the whole process. Well, no one bothered to tell me they would refund the other one. Is there a duplication here going on? Did I pay for 2 reviews? One that cost me $130, one that cost me $4,780. And I did everything else that has been required and requested by the Planning and Building Commission. Everything. I've jumped through hoops. It's cost me hundreds of dollars, months of time, effort to put 10 sets of plans, copies of 50 pages, so everybody in the whole county can review this, all the departments, so that they say no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment. I live on a piece of land that is completely legally permitted. I live in a zone where vacation rentals are permitted. The only problem I have is that I wasn't able to finish my driveway in 2008 when we had the financial crash, and I couldn't keep investing in my property. So I stopped the encroachment permit that I had. You may have seen it on the plans there that I'd already changed the address of the property, put in the driveway. I had to stop that. And now here it is 10 years later, and I hope to finish that, finally. And I'm hoping I can do it in the next 2 years before this renewal comes up. And I don't have to pay that $2,000. Because if I have a driveway that comes off Sherwood Road, which I have 10 acres that fronts it, I don't have to pay any of this. So I look at this as a rather hypocritical thing. And I understand the need for the county to review very carefully what goes on. But when you've got legally permitted structures, everything's, I mean, really, this should not take 8 months to review and have everybody review this and put the citizenry, like myself, who want to conduct a micro business in retirement through this. So that's my speech. I've held it in for a year and a half. The staff at the planning and building has been great. They have been responsive as much as they could be. But I'll tell you, I've talked to about 8 people down there and I've been told 8 different things. Completely contradictory things. So I finally determined I had no choice but to file a major use permit and go through this process to try to get this little business off the ground. And as far as the actual operations go, we're talking about a maximum of 6 people, a maximum of 2 cars. What I have now in this year and a half, the first year I made $9,000 in the first 6 months. In 2017, I made $18,000 running this business. That's gross income. I paid almost $2,000 in TOT and BID. That was after the tax collector chased me around, told me I was operating illegally. And I thought, oh, interesting. I'm thrilled to get this letter. You know why? Because I finally get into the system. Because planning and building said no to me. We won't take your application. And Steve Dunnacliffe and I had a nice discussion about that. He says, well, you should have been let in. I said, yeah, do you think? And that's how this has gone. And I have talked to 7 different people, all well-meaning, not knowing what the heck they're talking about. I'm grateful to have Jesse because he actually figured a lot out. And he wrapped this all up in a very nice, neat way. But still today, I have concerns about the fact that I am not classified in any writing or any identification as a minor use permit. And I wonder, as a minor use permit, would I even have to come here today to face you? Would I need a public hearing? I understand the process is the same, but I'm not altogether sure. I might have a private hearing and not have to go through all of the stress of this hearing here today in preparation for it. So I'm sorry to have to be the one to grind an axe about this, but I think you're going to be facing there. I'm not the only person in this county that has vacation rental issues. And this model, this vacation rental model is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And if I could speak just generally here today a little bit about it to help maybe inform you, because I don't think all of you are Airbnbers. I don't know if you've actually stayed at them, if you actually have been participating in this whole thing, but it is a wonderful experience. It's a lot of fun. We love it. And the people who come here are from all over the world, from the Silicon Valley. They come with money in their pockets. They spend anywhere from $600 to $1,000 on a weekend enjoying the amenities of our county here. It's really a boon for Willett because the restaurants are full, they're shopping in the little stores, and we desperately need that up there. And as far as there are no violations that I can see that an Airbnb model, I mean, I have full control over who comes to my home. I have bounced a few people because I didn't like the communication that started out with them. I have full control of that. It's a platform that works. It uses technology. It takes us into the next chapter of economic growth in a city that really needs it. And I consider myself part of the hospitality industry and part of the tourism effort that's going on in this county right now. And I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going. And if you hit me with another $2,000 bill in 2 years to renew this permit and keep my business license, I will face it. I'll probably pay it. You'll probably have me up here yelling about it again. So that's where I'm at with this. And I will now try to calm down. And I welcome your questions.
Yes. So it was an approximate $5,000 expense for the major use permit, and then what was the $2,000 on top of that?
That's in 2 years.
That's in 2
if
years.
they renew it, there's a $2,000 price tag attached to renewing my business license.
Jesse Davis, Planner 3. A business license renewal, correct me if I'm wrong, County Councilor, my Chief Planner, I don't believe that would be the cost associated with a standard business license renewal. A use permit does not have an annual renewal fee associated with it. A business license, I'll let Mary Lynn speak to that.
So Mary Lynn Hack, Planning and Building Services. I think that the confusion is that condition number 1 talks about a 2-year expiration. That's if they don't make use of the use permit. If they don't make use of the use permit within that period of time, the permit expires. There is no renewal date associated with this use permit. It will stay in effect until such time as the use is not used within a period of 1 year. If it ceases for 1 year, then they would have to file for a new use permit. There is a business license renewal fee through the tax collector's office, and our initial one was probably a $40 renewal fee. So there should not be any other renewals of this permit other than the business license fee, as long as it's kept active.
Really?
Thank you.
And then my follow-up question then is, you're still reviewing this to see if there is any other refund?
I'll let you.
Yes, so we have been able to refund from the planning and building fees. As you are aware, and as of July 1st, there was a fee increase. So we were able to refund the planning and building amount for the base fee post July 1st. We're currently looking in with administrative staff to determine how we would refund the fee based prior to that of the increase as of July 1st. That's a little bit more complicated. We're working on that. However, other departments such as environmental health and Department of Transportation also have fees associated, obviously, with the use permit. Their fees are going to be maintained separately, and we wouldn't be able to speak or refund those without going through those agencies in particular.
And can you explain to me the confusion over the minor use permit and the major use permit?
I'll let County Council also sort of follow up and provide further clarification. However, this was done after the moratorium that was subject to short-term rentals this past fall. As a result, staff received direction to begin investigating how to reduce this permit from a conditional to ministerial. The board at that time felt comfortable reducing it from a major to a minor in terms of cost. At this stage, we were able to reduce the cost aspects. The permits required is still a major use permit. However, we are essentially charging a minor use fee at this stage. We're looking to basically make those ordinance amendments to require a minor use permit moving forward. However, more broadly, that would take a little bit more time.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, I have not much to add to that. The board did give direction to at least look into an ordinance amendment to the zoning code, which does require us to go to the planning commission to at least take it from a major to a minor, and separately gave direction to start charging the cost just for a minor use permit. I can't speak to the fees on this particular item, but that's what planning is doing right now, and in terms of anything bumping it down beyond that, for these classes of units, it will take some more extra time. The reason this is even any kind of use permit at all is because I want to say a long time ago, we looked at the code and decided, yes, we needed to have a use permit for people who are not on a county road. So that's what the zoning code requires in this instance. And if that becomes a change, that might be a larger change to the zoning code than just changing it from a major to a minor.
Thanks for that clarification.
And following up on that, are these working?
No.
They're not. So for applicants who want to do the vacation rental, and if they were located on a public road, on a county road, do they not need to apply for the major use permit?
So Jesse Davis, Planner 3. On the Inland Zoning Division, an applicant who is applying for a short-term rental through room and board accessory use would only require a use permit if they do not have frontage on a publicly traveled road, public county road. If they have frontage on a private road, they require a use permit. And in this case, while the applicant does have while Sherwood Road is adjacent to the property, it does not constitute frontage because access is taken from a private road. So this is a somewhat unique situation. However, to reiterate, an applicant on a private road or who takes access from a private road on our Inland Zoning Division for room and board would require a use permit. Public road, no, simply a zoning clearance. Private road, yes, conditional use permit.
Can you explain the reasoning behind that?
I wish I could. Again, as Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski stated, this was an antiquated aspect of our accessory use code that when it was established in the 1980s or perhaps earlier, did seem to be appropriate for private roads. Given the reduction in the cost of information to host or to undertake an Airbnb or a short-term rental, that code might be antiquated in terms of its application in our Inland Zoning Division. But that's where it comes from. It's essentially the current regulations for room and board. On our Inland Zoning Division, there is no allocations for vacation home rentals as there is on the coast. Simply, we have room and board as an accessory use that has been sort of tucked away as part of our accessory code. Again, given the changes in this novel economy, as you can see, we just have a sort of disjointed appearance here where regulations don't match current economic activity.
Can county council or the department address that? Not that you don't have your hands full right now.
It's on our list. We have a large list of items that we need to update, and that is on our list. I can say that.
May I say something? I also would like the county to please distinguish between two words in the vernacular you use. One is frontage and one is access. Because across our country, those two words are kind of contradictory in a lot of counties. I did some research on this during this whole process. And the word frontage, the way we use it is it's where you enter onto your property, when actually when you're entering onto property, it's access. And there's a lot of confusion on these two terms. So I raised the issue with planning and building through this process to say, wait a minute, it says I have to have frontage from Sherwood, frontage on Sherwood Road. I do front Sherwood Road, 10 acres of it. And that isn't access. Access is you can actually access. So I got into this little hair splitting episode, and I lost that one. They said, no, frontage means access. I said, fine, black means white then. Okay, I'm fine with that. But I think we need to really make this clear. Because for those of us who live on dirt roads, and I am literally 0.6 miles up from Sherwood Road, and that's what's cost me this year and a half and $5,500. It's ridiculous. I really think our county needs to start looking at the people who live on these remote properties and say, for goodness sake, you're alienating us. You're making it so difficult for no reason. I'm trying to bring economic development and some business into this county. Let me do it. I'll work with you, but come on. And I'm very happy to hear I won't have to pay $2,000. Thank you, Jesse.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. I think we've all
Yes, I do want one more point. I really want some sort of written indication that I have a minor use permit. Because 2 years from now, when I have to renew whatever I have to do, I don't want to have to go through explaining all this to possibly new people who are at the planning department again. I just can't do that anymore. I want to have it really straight.
Mr. Kudrowski.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, I think maybe planning to put a note in the file. Right now, the code requires it to be a major use permit. So we've charged you a minor use permit amount, and that'll be there. There's no requirement for a renewal of that in 2 years.
The minor is not required?
No.
There's no
Okay,
renewal.
so I'll actually get my business license here, and it will be a permanent business license, and I won't have to come back in 2 years?
Through the chair, the business license, I think, is an annual requirement for renewal.
Oh, that is, yeah. Use permit.
A minor use permit, there's nothing here that says in 2 years there has to be a renewal. It says if the permit is not used in those first 2 years,
okay,
then the applicant would have to come back and do something about it because there's been no action taken on the permit. Otherwise, there's no renewal required.
how would the county track use of a use permit?
That sounds like
Ownership change,
It's attached to the land. We have files and tracking systems within our office that
Good.
that when you come in, everyone will know you have a use permit on your property, and that's what it's for.
Okay, and my last closing thing, I'd really like to see the county get synced with Airbnb and other portals. Because I pay the taxes, it's such a cumbersome old-fashioned system every quarter with the paper and the back and the forth, and you could sync this whole thing. And when I book somebody and I get paid, bam, the tax money's already in your coffers. It goes automatically to the county. And there's no waiting period, there's no filing, and you're totally synced. The world has changed, and we need to catch up and stop resisting this. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. Just get in touch with me. I'll work with you on it. I've offered to work as an advisory to the Board of Supervisors on Airbnb and vacation rentals. We have a lot of valuable information that you all need to make this animal work in our county. So please call me. And thank you. That's all I have to say.
I do have a comment from applicant and a question for staff.
Okay.
What a wonderful application that you put together.
Thank you. I worked hard on it.
I can tell that you did.
Yes.
And one of the things that I particularly appreciated is how you mentioned your relationship to your road association.
Yes.
And that you're current on your road dues.
Of course.
I live on a dirt road.
Yes.
I bill private road dues.
It's
There are those
essential.
people that pay those
Yes,
bills.
that's how they maintain our road.
So I
Absolutely.
appreciate you calling that out.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you persevered because I'm an Airbnb user.
Thank
and I
you.
get it. It's
Oh,
really is
blessings.
democratization of
Yes.
home sharing, and it makes all kinds of travel possible, and it brings a lot of money.
It's so much fun.
And it's a blast.
It is.
It's totally a blast. So I'm glad you persevered. I'm really looking forward to staff, along with the policymakers, looking at revising this process so that it can make more sense for the applicant and just be responsive really to how the world has changed, because the world has changed a lot in the last 5 years.
It has.
So thank you. And then the question for staff, I've heard 2 terms and I just wanted to ask for clarification. Is this a vacation rental or is it considered room and board, and is that an important distinction?
Jesse Davis, Planner 3. Yes, it's a very important distinction. It's one of the elements that is currently lacking in our inland code, which is why we are forced to approve such rental types through our room and board accessory use code. Vacation home rental definitions do not exist in our inland zoning division. They only exist currently in our coastal and Mendocino town area zoning divisions. So as a result, room and board and vacation home rentals are distinctly different. Room and board, as understood, typically does involve an owner on site as well. That's an aspect of the sort of room and board definition. But as a result, there are distinct differences between the two.
Okay, so this is not considered a vacation home, it's considered a room and board, that's an accessory use.
As defined by Mendocino County, it is not a vacation home rental, but through common language, yes, it is vacation rental.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions, staff? I reckon it's time to open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
Okay. Well, walk me through this again. I always forget where to look.
Way at the end.
Way at the end. Oh, page 3. Thank you. All right. So, I'd like to move that, it's this recommendation here, by resolution we adopt the categorical exemption and grant use permit number U 2017-0013 for the project based on the approved project description and findings and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A.
Second it?
Did you want to make any modification about the note on the map about major, minor?
Major and minor use permit?
No? Okay.
No.
All right.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell,
Yes?
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Commissioner Ogle,
Yes.
Commissioner Kruger,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Chair Holtkamp,
Yes.
motion carries 7-0.
And with that, we are going to take a brief comfort stop here, 10-minute recess, and then we will resume with our final item.
Nice work, Jesse. Thank you. That was great.
Break.
If I turned it off for the moment while we're taking a break.
Get up.
I'm Caroline Norris. I'm
Are you ready?
Are they back on? Oh, we're back on.
Oh, our microphones are actually working now, huh? Excellent. We will reconvene, and we are ready for item OA 2017-001.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mary Lynn Hunt, Planning and Building Services. Before you today, we have Ordinance Amendment 2017-0001. It's an amendment to Mendocino County Code Medical Cannabis Cultivation Site Regulations of the Inland Zoning Ordinance, and it's to amend Chapter 20.242040B, Table 1, and 20.242.040, Item D. The Mendocino County Board of Supervisors has directed staff to amend the code, has noted previously, this code is administered by the Planning and Building Department. The amendment would apply to all incorporated areas in the inland area of Mendocino County, with the exceptions of the incorporated areas. The change would remove the double asterisk notation on Table 1 of Chapter 20.242B to clarify that expansion of existing cultivation sites in the rangeland zoning district is allowed to a zoning clearance. It also involves deleting a reference to the rangeland section in 20.242040D. Within the Table 1 zoning clearance, a permit type for this existing cultivation in the rangeland zoning district, the requirement to obtain an administrative permit in the rangeland district appears as a double asterisk, and it's associated with Table 1. The double asterisk reads as follows. Existing cultivation sites in the FL, TPZ, and RL zoning districts are permitted subject to limitations of this section, and expansion of existing cultivation sites in the FL, TPZ, and RL zoning district is permitted subject to administrative permit. So this ordinance amendment would be removing that asterisk from the rangeland zoning district. And if you look at Table 1, which is on page 2 of the ordinance amendment, it's a red line. It's kind of confusing because under the RL, there's a double asterisk and it's underlined. We couldn't get it to do a strike through. So that underline is really a strike through. With all the computer people, we couldn't get it to do a strike through. So that's what that reads. So it would be removing that, and then of course any other red line changes within the document on page 2 and also on page 3. I'm going to let County Council give you kind of information regarding this in relationship to our initial study.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. The board directed that they did not believe the direction was given to make this change, and so as part of that direction, staff reviewed the documentation that had been before the Planning Commission and before consultants and staff as part of the ordinance drafting process. When the ordinance was sent, the board had given all the direction in 2016, and this went to LACO consultants and staff to do the CEQA review on the ordinance. It did not contain the notations that are seen on Table 1. It was worded differently, and in a few minutes, after I go through a few things, I'll bring up on the screen the errata sheet from the negative declaration that shows that. The asterisks had only been applied to forest land and TPZ in terms of needing an administrative permit if there was an expansion of the existing cultivation. The errata sheet then says, as a clarifying changes, doesn't say they're substantive, that that rangeland was added as part of that process. Now, we've talked internally, we don't know exactly where that came from, but we can't find board direction to do so. We could not find Planning Commission direction to do so. The Planning Commission resolution, we did provide copies of that to the Planning Commission, and they're available on as part of the board's packet. It did not discuss the issue of rangeland expansion and administrative permits. And the CEQA document does not require it either. The CEQA document studied the project assuming that there would not be an administrative permit for rangeland expansion. So with that, we're looking at this as a correction, given that the environmental document did not assume this to be a requirement for the project to go forward. It was not included. It seems to be an error in terms of what the last minute changes that were being made to the ordinance prior to adoption. at the time of the Planning Commission's review of this document, the mitigation measure that was directly on point for rangeland simply required no new cultivation sites in rangeland. So that was how the matter was discussed, at least more broadly in front of the commission. I can't specifically recount the Planning Commission's discussion of the item, if it did go to this topic or not, but the resolution does not address that. This aspect of rangeland expansion, it addresses the concern of asking the board to consider amendments to the overall ordinance structure in the future to possibly allow cultivation on rangeland, forestland, and TPZ, but it did not speak to expansion on that point. So based on that history, then we're not seeing how there was ever, a study or requirement that an administrative permit be done for rangeland. So that's the reason we're looking at this as a clarifying change, correcting an error, in that there was never direction for this to have been occurred, and no study was ever predicated on it happening, either up front or as part of a mitigation measure. So we're here at the Planning Commission because this is a zoning code amendment. Zoning code changes, the government code dictates that procedure, and we're bringing this to the Planning Commission first, and then on to after its report and recommendation, it will go to the Board of Supervisors. We did prepare an addendum pursuant to CEQA, which is attached to the staff report. And the addendum is the appropriate method for reviewing the effects of a change to a project when none of a set of circumstances has occurred. This is what's set out in the CEQA guidelines as the appropriate method. So the addendum reviews those circumstances. Of particular note is that substantial changes are not being proposed in this project because the ordinance was never drafted or assumed to have had the administrative permit requirement for an rangeland expansion. The initial study and mitigated negative declaration did not analyze the ordinance as having that requirement and did not add that requirement as a mitigation measure. So because of that, the primary prong of the circumstances outlined in the CEQA guidelines, it has not been, there's nothing there that would trigger anything beyond this addendum for this change. So since none of the circumstances requiring the subsequent mitigated negative declaration are present, the CEQA guidelines would say an addendum is sufficient for this change to the ordinance. There was correspondence provided to the Planning Commission, and it did briefly cite to two different cases in California case law regarding addendums, and I don't believe those cases are precisely on point. Mainly the issue is in addendums, the key issue is whether it's a new project or a modification of an existing project. The first case cited was specifically about a new shopping center project as opposed to an older shopping center project, and the court found that it was a new project. The second case cited going to criticize that analysis, but still found, again, it was more focused on a modification versus a new project. Here, I believe we're clearly doing a modification of the ordinance, and so we're looking at the circumstances that either exist or not. And again, because the ordinance was reviewed under the idea that there was no rangeland expansion, no requirement for an administrative permit for expanding in rangeland, we're looking at simply this is a modification that isn't meeting the circumstances to do more than an addendum under CEQA. The correspondence also referred to one of the mitigation measures in the CEQA document. It referred to it as mitigation measure 5. I believe it's referring to mitigation measure AG2, which was the mitigation measure regarding no new cultivation in rangeland. And that's a phase 3 issue, and the ordinance was changed on that basis. And that's how it was adopted by the Board of Supervisors. One last aspect of the correspondence is merely in terms of the request of the Planning Commission today. The correspondence asked that this be deferred by the Planning Commission until several months from now. I think given the board that would desire to see this in front of them, if the Commission wanted to revise the drafted report and recommendation, whether it's to recommend approval, to recommend denial, to recommend a deferral for whatever the reasons, we can put that in the report and recommendation. But I believe I would ask that the Commission do take action on this today, and then it will go to the board in several weeks' time for their consideration on those topics. Let me quickly go over to the laptop. I'll bring up the one page in the errata sheet from the CEQA document that'll show the strike through in the language that we're looking at most particularly. So this is a page out of the errata sheet. The Board of Supervisors did see the mitigated negative declaration as it had been presented to the Planning Commission. The board did make some changes to the ordinance after that point in time, and we also made some minor changes that were in an effort just to clean up the document and make sure it was internally consistent. So the board adopted this at the same time it adopted the mitigated negative declaration. This is a scan. It's referring to Table 3 up here because this is the same table we're talking about in the ordinance. It's just numbered differently in the mitigated negative declaration because of how it was, other tables came before it. In this table, you can see this was provided to the commission. There is no asterisks in the line for rangeland. And I think on a different version, it might be added here in red line. But the discussion here shows we had 3 asterisks, none of which referred to rangeland. That was part of the ordinance as it was presented in the mitigated negative declaration and as this went to the Planning Commission. Down below then it shows simplified language restating the previous Table 3 notes. And this is where rangeland comes up for the first time. Now, if the goal was to be simplified language restating the notes, then rangeland wouldn't have been there. And how rangeland was added as part of that and into the table, again, we have not been able to track that down. That being said, given the intent that's clearly being shown as part of these documents, there's no direction elsewhere in the mitigated negative declaration that would have required rangeland to be included on this table as having an administrative permit. So this was, in terms of looking back for intent as to why the change occurred, I can't say why rangeland ended up here, but if it was intended to be simplified language restating, that wasn't ever stated as a requirement. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I followed your last point. So that the paragraph at the bottom of the page, or the section, the existing cultivation sites in forest land, TPZ, and rangeland.
Correct.
That wording, which includes rangeland, did not end up appearing in the ordinance?
That's what's now in the ordinance. This is a sheet kind of showing the red line changes we're looking at. So yeah, the original version that was reviewed as part of the CEQA document was this language here in strikeout. And rangeland doesn't appear there. This errata sheet was trying to show changes that needed to be reflected in the mitigated negative declaration pursuant to changes presumably discussed by the Board of Supervisors prior to the adoption of the ordinance. Here, rangeland never isn't discussed at all as requiring an administrative permit, and in the table, there are no double asterisks anywhere on the rangeland line. So, as part of the errata sheet and cleanup that staff was doing to get the ordinance ready for final hearing by the board, the decision was made to replace this language, which is how it had been analyzed, with this language in the final version. And the issue that's there is that rangeland was never in the version analyzed by the board or the Planning Commission. And since there is no analysis as to why rangeland got added in this section, the CEQA document never presumed an administrative permit for rangeland expansion. Is that better?
Yes, it is.
I need to make sure it's better.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
Well, just thank you. This is really helpful in sort of disentangling some of the history of this. At first, I thought this could be as simple as just removing that asterisk, but then after receiving some of the correspondence, I dug a little deeper, went back and watched some of the board discussions about it and realized that this was kind of the crux of the issue is, was that administrative permit part of the mitigation in the mitigated neg deck? And I think that this shows us very clearly that that AP is just not required, and furthermore that we can't find any record of direction for that it really amounts to just a technical error. So thank you, this is very helpful.
Any other questions or comments of staff?
I'll just say, and I don't know that staff can reassure me, but somehow in my mind, I have thought that expansion in rangeland was not allowed But I couldn't tell you where I got that.
I had that same concern. What I would myself like clarity on is, under the zoning clearance, is any road building activity permitted?
So road building activity would be permitted, but they would be required to have a grading permit. And the zoning clearance doesn't really look at that. That would be a kind of a separate issue. We haven't seen a lot of that type of stuff going on because they're mostly existing grows. I think the other thing is, one of the confusions of no expansion is that in 2020, no new grows can occur in the rangeland district. So, and that might be where when you talk about expansion. So in 2020, there will be no new grows permitted in the rangeland, forest land, or TPC. But as far as roads, it would require a grading permit. We would definitely take a look at it through the building permit review of it. Planning would look at that.
Okay, so they would still be required to get a building permit for any expansion that they're doing?
Grading permit, right, if they're grading.
Well, or if they're putting up a greenhouse, they still have to get
Yes, building permits for greenhouses, yes.
Right. So as long as they have to get a permit to build the roads, and then I'm pretty okay with this. I think that was what both Commissioner Warner and I are remembering, is that what we really didn't want is roads running all over the place, just kind of willy-nilly. So, go ahead.
So are we in board discussion, or? I think I'll reserve, we're going to have board discussion.
We are going to have board
I'll reserve
discussion.
my comments,
Okay.
for that time.
Is there anything else that staff would like to add? All right. I think it's time to open the public hearing on this matter. And do I have speaker cards? Not too many, but we'll start with Roger Wheeler.
Good morning. Is this working?
I believe they are actually
Okay.
working now.
All right, great. Thank you for taking it to this level, this next step. We really need it. I'm a cultivator. I live in Hopland. Just a little bit of history, and I'm really thrilled that common sense seems to be prevailing. That's always a rare item when building new businesses and whatever. But there was you roll back the clock a little ways here, as has been shown by Matthew when all was digging. What was represented to us was that there would be no administrative permit regarding rangeland expansion. I really needed to hear that. Before we even got into this, to this level, come out into the full light of day and say, here we are, and we're going to start feeding all this information into the system. We're not living in the twilight zone anymore. We are excited about participating in a real economy. I needed to know that. So that was determined, and that satisfied me, and based on that, away we go. So that's all well and fine. But then and then we started our permit process last summer. We got pretty far along, and we've been stalled at this same point since August because of this problem. 800 and some odd applicants to get grow permits in this county. Last number I heard was 40 some odd folks have actually gotten their permit. The rest of us are all waiting. I've been told half of the total number of applicants are stalled out because of this point. We're now in February. We can get all the state stuff is kicking in. We can get a temporary state license, and it's only temporary because they won't give a full-blown license to unpermitted grows. We're all unpermitted still. We're still living in the past, and we're piling on more stuff that's temporary. We need to get this done, and we need to be fair about it. It's really holding up the whole industry, and a lot of us are wondering, are we going to take the next step? Is this really worthwhile? You know, we've put out a lot of time and a lot of money. The rangeland issue has, it seemed like it was just like a place to trash, in my opinion. Like, we'll just throw all these requirements on rangeland and, you know, big deal. Somebody's got to pay the piper here. So like I said, I'm glad we're moving ahead finally, and I really encourage you folks to do what I think is the right thing here. But I'd like to just take a moment to question what is the thinking, and it's still there, about gradually transitioning out of rangeland into where? After 2020, no new grows allowed in rangeland? Well, the transferability issue has been talked about. If I get a permit, it's in my name. It doesn't go with the land like it would go with any other normal business, any other ag business in this county, or most places in the world, I guess, that have private property. It goes with me. If I say I'm done, I sell the property, that expires. I can take it with me to the new property if I buy new property, which is where? Where do you want us to go, if not rangeland? The answers I've gotten have been into the valley, ag land. What's available in 5 and 10 acre parcels? By the way, we're only allowed to grow 10,000 square feet. That's our big grow in this county. You take that number and apply it in any other county in Northern California, that's in the small grow category. So our big is small, really. Where are you going to go? You're not going to find that kind of property being offered for sale that can be afforded for, you know, a reasonable amount of money. So you can't go there. It's not going to work. The industry is going to be a shrinking industry, not a growing industry. And why? What is bad about rangeland? To me, rangeland is tailored perfectly for future grows or for expansion. It's, for one thing, it solves the privacy issue to a large degree. It's typically off public roads, maybe on a road system of private roads. Maybe it's visible to a few people, but in general, it's spread out more. Less complaints about smell, noise, traffic, all that. It's the highest and best use of that kind of property. Previous to cultivation of cannabis, the highest and best use of rangeland typically was grazing cattle. And you make, I do it, got 300 acres I graze. I don't even pay my real estate taxes off of it. It helps, but that's the extent of that. Highest and best use, all of a sudden cannabis comes along. It's a no-brainer. I mean, you can actually have a livelihood. A couple families can live on the ranch and have a livelihood and pump money into this economy. And this area is known for premium, top-of-the-line product worldwide. This is part of the Emerald Triangle. If we can, that's our future. If we can tap into that and lock that in as what we're known for here, we're going to be a long ways down the road to success. That's what we offer. If we can, you know, put that out there, we need to be able to expand. We need to be able to make plans that don't get jerked out from underneath us, the basis of those plans. So please follow through, get this done for us. It'll be a huge step and a huge plus for the local economy. Thank you.
I think we need to do the 3-minute timer. Chris CRA something, and then I can't read it.
McCraw, MCCR.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm from Covelo, way out in nowhere. I'm on rangeland as well. I agree with everything he's just said. It makes a whole lot of sense to lift those asterisks off that. We're doing a 10,000 square foot limit, which is very, very small in comparison to what the state limit is or what every other county is. As he said, I think most people who have applied for a permit are in the rangeland, upwards 50 or 60%. And I would actually be curious as to what percent of Mendocino County square foot is rangeland. And that would be a good point to bring up, the amount of money that could be brought in with the permitted rangeland properties. Like he said, it's going to be out of the way. It's not, you know, I know every neighbor around me for miles, and we're all under the same, you know, harmony, and nobody's complaining out there about anything anyone else is doing because we're all neighbors. We're all family. I know everything about them. They know everything about me. That's not the case in the valley. With the valley, you do have the pesticidal issues. This is a health impact on the consumers, and these are issues you don't get on rangeland. Also, something I want to bring up is the micro business permitting. That's not allowed on the rangeland. Micro business would basically allow a cultivator to sell their product to retail businesses without having to purchase different different permitting along the way. And then manufacturing of the product. Level 1 manufacturing is an issue in my opinion because as you know, as a cultivator, what you're growing is the flower. To do a level 1 manufacturing, that's a non-volatile is what the state has listed it as. No solvents. You're basically getting a screen and you're shaking your flower and getting the pollen, the smaller, you're filtering it through. So no reason to not be able to do that and to sell my flowers, smaller pollen out on the market. There's just no reason. I think this is a common sense issue again here. And I really like to see all the regulations lifted off the rangeland just because it seems like that's what's going to be the future for the county. So, yeah.
Thank you. Aaron, must all be doctors. Aaron, I think either starts with a G or a C.
It's G. Green, just like the color with an E on the end.
I couldn't read it, thought I'd ask.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
Same thing that obviously everybody's talked about. The RL and this clerical error has really held us up tremendously. It's confusing to me because I was in the 9.31. I ran 10,000 square feet in the 9.31. I run 10,000 square feet now. I didn't expand. I haven't changed. But no one will permit me for what I want to do because of this clerical error and getting through that. If you read through here, I didn't expand. I haven't changed it. I shouldn't need the AP, even if you guys kept it in here. But the verbiage is so that Jesse, who's in charge of our stuff, no one will err on one way or another just because of this. I fall under the, we didn't expand, we've always been doing this, but no one wants to make the decision on whether it's okay or not okay. So obviously if we remove this, we get to go forward. Also, the timely fashion, we've been granted our state temporary permit. I don't know how well aware you guys are of what the marketplace is like. We have 120 days until that permit's up. This has to be solved so I can get my permanent permit for us to go forward in the marketplace. Right now, nobody in this room can sell a single piece of product in the marketplace legally without a state permit. Doesn't matter what the county's doing. Right now, you can't sell a single dispensary unless you have your state permit. So even if we're all trying to go forward, we can't move forward unless we're on the state level, even though we're in compliance with our county or this, and that. Without the state permit, you're not getting into any dispensary, you're not getting into any distributor. So if we don't move this forward, I have 120 days till now I can't do anything. I can't move forward, I can't go sideways, I can't go any direction until this is fixed. And I urge you guys to solve this problem as quickly as possible, only because it is affecting everybody. And the RL, like if you go through the water district or anybody else, our rangeland is the best possible place we can cultivate cannabis. If you move us to the valleys, there's all sorts of water issues, whether the fish and game can air, whether we can use that water, whether we can't use that water, is it surface water, is it groundwater, there's all these different things that fall into these things. Sometimes in the rangeland, there's you have access to places where we can grab water, we can grab it below where it takes us out of this fish and game, and hopefully achieve what we're all trying to do, which is come above ground, pay our taxes, be a part of this whole thing, which we've been a part of for many, many years now, from the 9.31 all the way through this process. But it is so difficult, it is so confusing on just this half of it, and then to try to get into the marketplace and be successful in the marketplace, the dynamic of that again is very difficult. And coming from the Emerald Triangle, my family's been here for 100 years.
You're at your 3 minutes.
Oh, Okay.
So wrap up.
Okay, I just urge you guys to rule on this. Please look towards changing some of the zoning for the RL. Open it up so we can get some of our micro business stuff, so we can move forward as a vertically integrated farm and be successful, because us competing against the other counties in the state is extremely difficult. And we're in an area that we should be able to compete. Thank you.
Zach Aarons, I believe, and then Bill Gross after that.
Yeah, hello, Zach Aarons here. I head farmer relations for Flocana as well as business development for all of our facilities in Mendocino. I'm just going to echo the comments that have already been said. I think we talked about the clerical error of this, but just urging that any clarity we can provide for our cultivators in their path towards licensure at the state level, I just urge that to be done with swiftness and with clarity. And just speaking to the fact that the EIR, the Environmental Impact Report, commissioned by the CDFA, did find that there were no significant concerns related to cannabis cultivation as far as the environmental impact is concerned. And for the record, we are embracing third-party certifications for environmental compliance for all of our cultivators that operate here, and all the cultivators that operate in Mendocino rangeland. Just anything we can do to make their path to compliance easier is something that we want to get behind, not only for the county of Mendocino, but also for cultivators across the state. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's AHRENS.
Mr. Gross.
Good morning, commissioners. Wanted to again thank you for the clarification. My name is Bill Gross. I am a cultivator on rangeland in Redwood Valley. My concerns have been addressed today, specifically on the timing. My concerns are mirrored as what has been spoken before me. My concern at this point does deal specifically with the micro business permit. I view that as the direction specifically for the grows that we're talking about on rangeland. Specifically for us, we also have a problem. We've been involved since the 9.31. We have a distribution and delivery issue right now. And by applying for the micro business model and the corresponding state license that is the same as the county will allow us the ability to grow on our property, to manufacture on our property, and to distribute from our property. There, again, has been mentioned, we have product from last year that we cannot get off our property without this license, without the state license. On the micro business, that opens up the model for us to keep everything integrated by ourselves. We have the control over what we grow and what we distribute, and we want that ability. I know it's a timely issue for everybody here. It's a timely issue for us. We have applied for the micro business on the rangeland moving forward in hopes that we'll be approved and be able to conduct business. Again, we've been participating in the tax structure since the 9.31. We have been a mutual benefit corporation since 14, and we pay our taxes, and we want to continue to pay our taxes. We want to continue to see the growth of Mendocino cannabis industry, and we're willing to do pretty much whatever it takes in specific to the micro business license, whether it be a minor, a major, an administration, a special use permit. We need to know what we need to do to go forward specifically for this micro business model as it pertains to here in Mendo and then the state. And so I just really want to ask the planning department and the commission to address this in a timely manner. We're hanging out there. We have spent a tremendous amount of finances, time, effort, and money moving forward to this point, and we've waited to January 1st, 2018. Our time is now, but we need some ability to move forward with timely permit review, application review, and whether it be a temporary permit that will allow us to get the temporary state. We need something moving forward specific to that. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. Casey O'Neill. And then Swami Chaitanga.
Bingo, got it. Casey O'Neill, local farmer, Happy Day Farms, Vice Chair for California Growers Association. I'm very, very happy to hear what County Council had to say. His words jibe very well with my recollection. I've been part of the ordinance development process this whole time, since the urgency ordinance for 2016. During the course of the ordinance process, I was tracking the rangeland question very, very closely, because at the time I was of the impression that my parcel was rangeland. It turns out it's upland residential, but regardless, I was tracking the issue very, very closely, and I missed the change with the double asterisk. And so then, lo and behold, people are being asked for APs on rangeland, and I'm telling them I don't think that's the case. And so then, you know, I came down and went to building and planning, and was kind of like, hey, I think this is wrong. And they were like, no, look, here, see in the ordinance, this is where it is. And that was a total surprise for me. And so what County Council had to say in terms of the mitigated neg deck, I agree with wholeheartedly, and I very much appreciate that it does at this point appear that we are coming to the conclusion that that was an error and that it should be changed. A little bit of background, you know, essentially right now, a lot of people are really struggling with the permit process. There are many, many layers of regulation that are being applied that are much higher than, you know, I like the comparison that as a vegetable farmer, which I am, I could fire up a quarter acre of vegetables without talking to anybody about anything. And there would be no requirements whatsoever. If I wanted to sell those vegetables, I need a producer certificate, which I also have, but point being, there's a huge amount of things that are being required of cultivators, and this adds a superfluous layer. This is the administrative permit for an expansion on rangeland is not necessary, given the extensive requirements on prohibition of cutting trees, CDFW involvement, the State Water Board involvement, along with a whole more list. So thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to comment, and I am very hopeful that you will vote to remove the AP requirement for rangeland.
Good morning. I'm Swami Chaitanya. I'm president of the Mendocino Cannabis Industry Association. I'm also involved in the Mendocino Appellation Project. And I want to thank you for considering this. This is a very important issue, but I want to get a little context here. I hope you all know that the cannabis economy is at least half of Mendocino's economy, at least half. It's at least half of the jobs come from cannabis. Now, whatever your own personal feelings, whatever your own call them prejudices about cannabis and so on, it's also a fact that cannabis helps cure cancer. Cannabis is for post-traumatic shock, for concussion. All of these are now medically determined procedures that come from cannabis. We grow the best cannabis in the world. We need to make this an industry that we're proud of in Mendocino County, because what happens is we're depending on it, and there are 10,000 people out there who probably grow cannabis, many of them senior citizens with tiny little plots. Now we need a gesture from you that you support cannabis industry, because it's the most important industry in Mendocino County. It's the most important medical advance that's come along in 100 years. Please don't stand in the way of that. We're talking about an expansion of 5,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet with a permit. Well, now wait a second. How big is that? You say 5,000, 10,000. That seems pretty big. Well, I checked around. You know the size of a basketball court? That's 4,700 square feet, almost 5,000 square feet. That's a basketball court. So we're just asking for 2 basketball courts side by side so the girls can play too. Now listen, if you have a football field, this distance from the 10-yard line to the goal line and the width of the field, that's 10,000 square feet. Now, if you're concerned about roads, we have Fish and Wildlife. We have a permit process. All these things are protecting the roads. We're very much in agreement with that. We've been also part of the 9.31 program, and we have clean green certification, and we just had the Agricultural Commission out to look at our property. We've had the Salmon Water Board, the Discharge Board, and so on and so forth. We are jumping through every hoop you throw at us. Please make a gesture that you support this industry, because it's the most important industry in Mendocino County. And without it, your automobile dealerships go under, your carpenters, plumbers, and so on don't have jobs. Without cannabis, the county goes bankrupt. So please, just a little gesture that you support us, because we've been supporting you for 20 years. Thank you very much.
Hannah Nelson, I believe, is next.
Good morning, I'm Hannah Nelson. I also have been involved in the development of the regulations for many, many years, actually the original 931 program. And I want you to focus on a couple of things. First off, this is a unicorn moment. 2 lawyers agree exactly. That's like never happens. Everything that Mr. Kurdowski said is absolutely correct and on point. But I want to focus on not only is this just a technical fix, which is made very clear and obvious, but also just to allay any other concerns that you might have. Some people have referred to all kinds of other regulations, and you might just hear, oh, people are whining about regulations. I want to give you some assurance that as of October of 2017, water rights, water discharge, and fish and wildlife protections, whether it's habitat or species protection, specific only to cannabis, have changed. Probably 150 years of water law, first off, but really intensified the requirements. So irrespective of what building and planning might require, these are imposed on every single property for a cultivator, no matter what, period. Without any, doesn't matter what's required by the county or not, it's going to be imposed no matter what. So with respect to the roads, the discharge issues, the species issue, all of it, it's all being highly regulated. And the, I think it was like 150 pages of emergency regulations that got finalized in October, quite intensive. And it might be interesting for y'all to look at those regulations. And separate from the water-related and environmental-related regulations, there is the overall state regulations regarding how the cannabis industry can operate. So here we have the intersection between zoning at a local level and our local ordinance with then the overlay of all the state issues. And I just want to kind of step back and say, even if this weren't a technical fix, which it is, there are still all of these oversight compliance issues, and it's not just a matter of people whining, oh, now we have to be regulated. I just want to assure you from a regulatory and administrative standpoint that the implications of what people have to do and what the oversight are very, very specific and address all environmental concerns. Thank you for your time. And Ellen Drell.
My name's Ellen Drell, and I'm speaking for the Willits Environmental Center. I would like to note that Mr. Kurdowskis is correct. There's an error in our comments, and the mitigation referred to is not mitigation 5, it's mitigation A2, and I'd like to add that to the record for our comments. I also want you to know that the Inland Mendocino County Land Trust has added their support to our letter and endorses our recommendations officially in an email to me as of this morning, and we'll get that to you as well. I have to disagree with County Council's analysis, even though we can't exactly identify the time, the actual meeting and discussion where this change appeared. We don't consider it a technical error. We feel that it has significant environmental impacts. I just want to review that the table as it stands now, we support leaving the table as it stands now. The table as it stands now already separates rangeland from the other 2 natural resource restricted zones, forest land and TPC. It somewhat loosens regulations on rangelands because it says anyone who's growing, has a cultivation site on rangeland now, an existing site, and can apply for a permit in this phase 1, can do so with a zoning clearance right now. The only thing they can't do is expand their site. And when I saw the double asterisk in the final adopted version of the ordinance, I thought, great, because that kind of corrects that discrepancy between rangeland and the other resource lands, which I don't feel, I mean, both have environmental values that need to be protected. They're not the same, but they are not unequal. And so when this table appeared with rangeland clearance for existing permits versus an administrative permit required for forest land and TPZ, our feeling was that's not really justified, but because of all the other complications and the desire to get things moving, we let that go unchallenged. So when the double asterisk appeared on the table, we thought, great, because this says that, okay, your existing sites can go forward with a zoning clearance, that's fine. But if you're going to expand, if you're going to increase from 2,500 square feet to 5 or 10,000 square feet, if you might need new roads, if you might need to increase your water sources, then you can't just get a zoning clearance. You can't just show the county that, yeah, I'm in rangeland. You actually have to do some form of administrative review. And we thought that was justified and appropriate. And it supported the mitigation in the mitigated neg deck that said no new growing on rangeland. And that, you know, and as Matt Kradowski noted, that the mitigated neg deck didn't even really discuss the issue of expansion. But in practice, expansion is new growing. So we felt, okay, with that double asterisk, things are, you know, the county has oversight. The county knows what's going on. All this talk about the state regulations, that's fine. I'm glad the state is requiring regulation. Whether or not the state can actually know what's going on all these individual properties in Mendocino County, who knows? Who knows if they can do that? Maybe they've picked out some properties and they're taking a good look at those, but there are lots of cultivation sites in Mendocino County. I don't think the county should leave to the state imposing water regulations, wetland filling regulations, all the other things that could be impacts as a result of expanded growing. I think, and the state actually says that they are operating in partnership with the counties. So the county needs to be involved in the process. If these expansions have no significant environmental impacts, then fine. I think a simple administrative permit, a minor use permit, or there are degrees of oversight even at the administrative permit level, and these permits could be expedited if the county determines that there aren't issues that need to be looked at. On the ground, what's really taking place on the ground, I'm very familiar with a particular issue of an expanded site on rangeland. It happened without anybody noticing. No permit was filed. There were double trailer loads of rock taken out to the property and laid. The spring, which is fairly near the creek, was expanded. And I don't know how much more water they're pumping out of that spot. And there was also a fuel spill. All, you know, without any sort of oversight by the county until code enforcement had to look into it. So I think this double asterisk helps the county prevent that sort of thing. So I urge you to leave it in. Leave it the way it is. See how it works. Thank you.
Matt McGuire.
Hello, my name is Matt McGuire. Thank you guys for reviewing this issue. I've lived in Mendocino County for 35 years, and I applied for a cultivation permit back when it first came out, and my permit's been held up the whole time because possibly I need an administrative permit, possibly I don't. All was something that I was already told I could do from the sheriff's department. And rangeland zoning allows for a lot of things. You know, I got the thing right here. It allows for a ton of different uses. It's kind of unfair to say that just because you're growing cannabis, you got to do an administrative permit. If you guys want to, you know, like say it's okay to do it for one thing, you know, then it's not really fair. And I think that if we're talking about unpermitted issues, you know, if people are doing stuff without a permit, obviously it's not gonna, you know, like people are gonna do things without a permit. Doesn't really matter what they're doing, it's not gonna be covered under the EIR. And basically, I just hope that you guys can remove this from the, you know, the administrative permit, because I'm waiting for my state license, and until I get a local permit, I'm not gonna be able to get a state license, and I'm not gonna be able to continue paying my cannabis cultivation tax, which I paid without a local permit. Thank you very much.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on this issue? Seeing none, we can close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Anybody care to start?
Sure. So, well, I think from our last discussion, you know where I stand. I think rangeland is the place to have cannabis grows. I think it's important to bring cannabis into the light and make them part of the legal economy. I think it's interesting that today we have 2 cases before us where the economy's been hobbled because of administrative issues, and I'd like to see this one cleared up. Another big issue, you know, for the agriculture community is administrative creep. It seems like we kind of have these folks over a barrel, and every agency's asking for a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and at some point that's going to reflect on pear growers, grape growers, the rest of the agriculture economy. So I don't think we ought to be burdensome for the cannabis industry as well for that reason. So obviously I'm going to vote to remove this from the table, the double asterisk.
Anyone else?
Yeah. I heard some commenters talk, and this I think is a question to staff, about the micro business permits, and it seems that these might be important in rangeland grows, whether they are expanded or not. And I wonder, it seems like that would shed a little light on their ability to do business. Could we get any updates on
Sure.
these?
So, Mary Lynn Hunt, Planning and Building. As you heard earlier, we are in the process of doing some amendments. And right now, micro businesses in the rangeland area is not allowed for adult use cannabis. So, or excuse me, it is not allowed for medical use cannabis. So part of what you have is a medical cultivation program in front of you. And one of the amendments we're doing is to be combining them, medical, adult, into one. They'll just be cultivation. You won't have that distinction. So microbusiness is at the top of our list also for reviewing and getting back to you at a future date.
So the thought at this time is not necessarily that it would be inappropriate for micro business permits in rangeland, or that it might be?
At this time, it's not allowed for medical cultivation, and that's what we're looking at the moment is medical cultivation. So microbusiness not in.
But when medical is combined with recreational and it's just
It'll just
one.
be cultivation. You won't have that distinction. And Matt, I know, wants to weigh in on this.
Okay.
Just to elaborate a little bit further, because we haven't, we've been preparing for today in parts. We're still working at what those regulations might look like. The state regulations, they came out with different kind of subtypes that made us think more about what we had taken was probably a more, I would say, laissez-faire approach to micro businesses. We looked at, if you have a cultivation site, you could do your level 1 manufacturing as an accessory use to that. Well, looking at how the state is now looking at reviewing permits and applications, we think we need to be better matching their terminology so no one's getting confused. Because it sounds like the state, they want to see more specifics from the county, not less. So we're going to come back with micro businesses and be thinking about what impact maybe we don't want to see on rangeland. So we'll have maybe specific types of micro businesses that you could do. One of the issues is distribution. When we started this whole process, we thought about distribution as a warehouse facility. The state sees it as different than that. So if we're going to allow distribution, we think we need to be more specific as to not a warehouse facility on a dirt road. So those are the things we're taking a harder look at now. And those, I think, we're targeting March 15th to bring those back to the Planning Commission.
Okay. I think I got my idea that expansion was not allowed in rangeland just from that bottom sentence. But I hear what people are saying. Maybe the 10,000 square feet isn't that much of a difference. But I somehow in my mind just have it tied to the EIR. And don't know that I can support this, but the board can do as they will.
Anyone else?
I had a question for staff. Is there anywhere in the permitting process for cultivation where it looks at the applicant's road access? And I'm putting this also in the context of the previous case, which was the Airbnb out Sherwood Road, and where if she was accessed off the public road, it wouldn't require the use permit, but since she was on a private road, it would. And in my mind, there's a rationale there, because I live on a dirt road and there's road dues, and you want to make sure that someone's current and a contributing member, and not just basically running their business off the sweat of other people's backs. Is there anything like that for cannabis cultivation?
So, just briefly pulling up the chapter 10A17 in front of me. Certainly the site plan has to show the location of easements and all access to the property, and all areas of ground disturbance or surface water disturbance associated with cultivation, including access roads. So at least in the site plan, that is something that we're seeing. I would defer to Mary Lynn Hunt in terms of whether that's an issue that pops up, as whether it's new versus old, in terms of what we've been seeing.
So through chapter 20, we're not, it's not like on our checklist. I know that we do look at it and building also looks at these permits. So if they're seeing roads that maybe are newer, they would, put a hold on it for a grading permit. But as far as private roads, there's nothing, I don't believe in chapter 10 either, that would address that.
To build on that, and I'll speak, and then I might look back towards the back of the room. Diane Curry, our interim ag commissioner, is here as well. But in terms of the ag ordinance, if any on-site or off-site component of the cultivation facility, including access roads, does have any issues that would impact a bank of any stream, then they have to show they've notified CDFW for a lake and stream bed alteration agreement. So things, and I know the state's becoming more involved in that process as well, and demanding more information about where those roads are. So the roads are involved in terms of what we're seeing. They're telling us where they are at. Is there anything that we can add on that?
Diane Curry, interim ag commissioner. One thing that I will say is we're not looking at that specifically, but that's specifically being looked at by Fish and Wildlife and by the State Water Board. So those issues are being addressed through those two agencies. And not to say that my staff isn't looking at all that stuff too, but I think we've already had a discussion about the fact that, on these private roads, what is our involvement? So again, when Fish and Wildlife gets out there, certainly they have some input, and so does the State Water Board.
Do you have any idea if they care, excuse me, about road improvement associations and membership in them?
I don't know. They don't get in, as far as I know, they don't get into, the road associations, how the roads are being maintained.
Just to tag on to that, Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, I would presume that if we have a road that's affecting a lake or stream bed, they'd be very concerned about, how it's maintained. To the level that those have been previously applied for or not, I'm sure they're very active on enforcement now. I think they're really working more on applications than they were a year ago. I also would say, our ordinance was built on getting clean, making sure we had clearance from other responsible agencies. So that's why this requirement that I read out about making sure they're notifying CDFW is part of the process.
Thank you for that. And a big part of the reason why I was asking about that is because I think one of my biggest concerns around this theoretical expansion of grows on rangeland would be the impacts to the roads, not only the environmental impacts to the streams through sedimentation and erosion, but also just the impact to the neighbors who on these private roads are going to wind up paying for it. So if there was some kind of way, I know that there's many applications well into process, but really just to look at, again, like the Airbnb case, to look at whether these folks are current on their road dues, that would make me happy. But with that being said, I also have seen my fair share of grows on rangeland, and I can tell you that I am not of the opinion that 10,000 square feet would actually be an expansion. From what I've seen, I think people are already at that level, and that as regulation has unfolded, that they've been sort of capped at a smaller level. So I don't actually think it would be having greater impact to the environment. And again, that's just from my personal experience. But more to the point here, as what County Council has shown us, which is that the CEQA documentation doesn't seem to be relying on that administrative permit for rangeland. And so I'm going to ultimately have to kind of lean in that direction, that it does appear to me that this is just a technical error.
I have personally one question about this. When we talk about expansion, we really haven't discussed the definition of expansion, but I am assuming that this is owner-operated expansion, right? In other words, this is an expansion where they're leasing a grow to another operator whose permit status we don't know. Is that correct?
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, that's correct, given the structure of the program requiring that it be, the applicant now has to have been the prior cultivator. The proof of prior cultivation requirement of 10A17 links that person together. So even if it was a tenant farmer, that would have been the person had to show they were cultivating there before and they're cultivating there now.
Gotcha. And the other thing, I think this will be more of a planning thing, is do we look at slope and things like that? I remember in our original discussion of this, there was an RCD memo that said that they thought that about 70% of the expansion possibility in rangeland was at greater than 30-degree slope. And I have no way of knowing if that is true, but I just wonder, are we looking at that? Because then, you know, in those big kind of ways in the landscape, they're different, you know? I mean, it's one thing if it's somebody's just extending the meadow, and it is another thing if it's uphill.
And Interim Ag Commissioner Diane Curry, I'll speak to that. So yes, we do look at that, staff is looking at that, but that is also a requirement for Fish and Wildlife and the Water Board. So that is being looked at.
We have a request for a very brief recess, and we are going to take a couple minutes out here. Thank you. And here are speaker cards back.
I like watching board meetings doing these discussions.
I used to like my train whistle. Go ahead, Roger.
I'd just like to comment that I support the correction. And I think that the arguments have been very effectively made. And I really haven't heard a good argument to not make the change yet. I don't see this opening up this great balloon of expansion and the whole county changing its appearance because of all this expansion. I think whether you have the permit or whether you have the zoning clearance, I don't think we're going to see a noticeable change.
Any other discussion? Okay, well, I guess we're ready for a motion.
Well, I would like to make a motion to make the change. We have a resolution. Is this the motion that, or maybe you can help me with the motion?
Actually,
Page 2.
This is page 2 of the memo. Page 2. The very
Page 2 of the resolution. All right, so I'll read the recommended motion. Adopt resolution making the necessary findings and recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve ordinance amendment number OA 2018-001, which will modify the inland zoning ordinance of Chapter 20 of the Mendocino County Code, specifically Section 20.242.040, finding that the addendum to the adopted mitigated negative declaration is appropriate to address the requirements under CEQA for the proposed ordinance changes, and that no additional subsequent environmental review is needed to review the impact of the proposed ordinance changes.
I'll second it, but I'll add one more zero after OA2018-0001. I think there was another zero in there.
Well, got to keep those zeros straight. So we have a motion and a second.
Where are you adding the zero?
Oh, no, it's already in there. He just didn't read it.
As written.
What do you want from a farmer?
Roll call.
Commissioner Ogle?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Warner?
No.
Commissioner Kruger?
Yes.
Commissioner Hall? Chair Holdcamp?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any further matters from staff? I am made aware under matters from the commission that we neglected to approve our draft calendar. So if anyone has any comments or questions on that.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any other matters from commission? Yes.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. I just wanted to clarify, I will not be at the February 15th meeting, neither of the meetings in March if there are, or the April 5th meeting. I kind of gone through that before, but I wanted to make sure that it was on the record of those dates. The other item I had, we haven't had minutes for quite a while. Is there?
Minutes are on the next agenda.
And I won't be here to read them.
I'll email them
early, else
I'll email them to you beforehand.
And I just had a question for staff. Is there a requirement to notice if, for instance, a residential group home is established in an Ag 40 area? I believe it's allowed. I did look at the zoning, but I didn't know if that had to be noticed.
There, up to a certain amount of people, there is no hearing process. If it goes over a certain amount of occupants, then it would require probably a use permit of some type, and there would be public notice required for the public hearing.
If I may, through the chair, Nash Gonzalez, director. I believe the number is 6, and it's a state permit. So the State Department of Health Services issues the permit. There is no noticing because it is we'll call it a group care home type of use under state law, that they just allow it in all zones that allow residential. And when you say ag zoning does allow for a residential use. I know that in residential zones such as the RR, R1s, R2s, there's no question about it, but my understanding is any zone that allows for a single family home, which again ag and rangeland and forest land, all of these resource zones do allow, there would be no noticing, as like our chief planner noted, that once it gets over that amount, once over 6, the zoning code does provide for a minor use permit and a major use permit, depending on the use that the number of folks. And so at that point, then there would be a public notice for a project.
Okay, so just let me clarify. So if it's more than 6 in a residential unit, but I believe you mentioned 1 residence, how about if there are 2 or 3? Does that number 6 still apply, or could it be 6 per home?
I believe it's dealing with the occupants, not the number of structures. So it's occupants is how it's tied to, whether they put them in one building or they put them in separate buildings.
It's per parcel.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'll be stopping by your office. So it would, if there was, it would have required a minor, say there are 18 residents in a group home. That would require either a minor or a major use permit in an Ag 40. Is that correct?
Without our code in front of us, I would, if you have, it sounds like you have something specific, so please come in and we can discuss it,
Thank you.
At the counter. That'd be great. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
So it looks like I'm going to miss both meetings in March.
So we have 2 commissioners who are meeting both meetings in March, so it will be somewhat critical if other people
still have a quorum so far.
Yeah, that we still have a quorum. So let us know well in advance if another person is going to miss.
I did have a question, and
Yes.
I'm kind of sorry to bring it up, but it's been on my mind for a few months, and it looks like every meeting is going to be busy with a lot of things. Anyway, updating our zoning code since we did the general plan amendment. Do we have any hopes of getting to that in the next 2 years?
I am hoping that we can go ahead and start that process. Just before I left back in 2012, we were looking at a zoning code update. I believe we are at a point where we need to go back and start looking at the zoning code again for a number of reasons. One is the integration of policies and I'll say objectives in both the UVAP and as well as the general plan. But most important of all, the first thing that's on our list of things to do is to bring before the Planning Commission and ultimately before the Board of Supervisors an amendment dealing with the new state regs dealing with accessory dwelling units and accessory junior dwelling units, which basically would be an amendment to Chapter 20.164 of the zoning code, which deals with second units. So we no longer, or the state no longer refers to these as second units. They now refer to them as accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. So that is one of our first tasks that we will be working on. One of the issues that we've encountered is that we need to do this countywide. So we will be bringing forth the inland first and then the coastal zone second, and that's the issue that has been holding things up, because we know it'll require an LCP amendment to go through the coastal zone process. So there are a number of things that we're seeing right now that really need to be updated, and I know that amongst ourselves as staff, we're just keeping notes as to which of the issues, but the code does need to be updated. It was programmed to be updated. And so I'm hoping that within 6 to 8 months, I can bring an item to the board that actually details what we're going to be doing as far as what I call the short fixes. But I can tell the commission now that the first fix we need to do is the accessory dwelling units. I'm not sure if there's any specific concerns that the Planning Commission has, or is it just in general?
Mine is in general.
Okay.
I had a couple of specifics. One is the ADU. That's great that that's near the top of the list. And was it 6 to 8 months that you'd be bringing that list to the board, or 6 to 8 months that you hope to have a draft of some of these short fixes?
No, I'd be first thing I'm going to be doing is bringing a work program to the board, which would basically call out for some of the things that would need to be dealt with in the zoning code immediately. I think one and the major issue that we've had is the lack of staffing. So ideally what we would like to do is to try to do some of these things in-house rather than to try to go out and hire a consultant to do a zoning code update. What I did just before I left, and I really don't know what happened other than it just got put off because there was no time and staff, but I had actually solicited a planning grant for the updated zoning code, and the county was granted the grant, but unfortunately there was nobody to administer it or actually start doing the work. So that was actually a $140,000 grant to do the zoning code update. So the county had to give that money back sometime in 2013 or so.
That's a shame.
But yeah, and the idea was that it was going to be a wholesale update of the zoning code. What we were looking at was a code that would be interactive on the web. It would be a code that would use diagrams and matrices, very similar to what you see right up here on the board, where you would have classifications and tables to make it much easier, because our code is a 1981 code with subsequent amendments, so it is a little antiquated. And prior to that, we were working with the 1956 code. Mm-hmm. So it only took us 8 years to get the general plan, and now we're finding that one of the things that we actually need to do to the general plan is update the safety element. And so one of the things that we're doing is we just put in for a grant so that we can update the safety element. And again, there's some competition there, but one of the things that needs to happen is you need to integrate your hazard mitigation plans into the safety element. You need to deal with fire, you need to deal with sea level rise. So there's a number of different things that need to happen. And again, the grants, I believe they close Monday or Tuesday, but we just had our CDBG consultant submit the paperwork on Monday of this week. So hopefully there'll be some money there that we can update the safety element. And if that is the case, then what that does is that sets us up for yet another zoning code update. Mm-hmm. So we're actively pursuing these things.
That's great. I'm just hoping it'll happen in my lifetime on the commission, because I'm finding that I forget a lot. And I'm hoping that if we get to that, I might remember a lot of those discussions from the general plan.
I'm hoping that at least in my tenure here, we will start and finish a zoning code update.
Great.
Well, a second item that I would love to see added to that short fix list would be the issue that we heard this morning on the vacation rentals versus room and board, which sort of in this day and age is more of like a house sharing. So I don't even know what the world has changed, and so I don't know what it would be called, but basically to allow for people to do the short-term rentals either out of an accessory unit or out of their home. And I understand there's not really even existing language that's tailored to that now in the zoning code.
Currently, right now, the zoning code, if I may, through the chair, deals with, and this is an issue that's come up before, is if it's on a publicly maintained road, it's a use that wouldn't require a use permit, but if it's a use that accesses off of a private road, it's a use permit that's triggered. And this has been an item that's discussed in front of the board before. It's been an item that has spurred discussion relative to, are these types of units taking single-family homes out of production? Are the Airbnb issues affecting housing and so on? So this is one of those items that we will be revisiting in the future.
And when you do that, it would, I'm not sure that this affects Mendocino County, but I've just been hearing so much about the impacts on rental housing in the greater Bay Area, in New York City, and places like that where they have the money to study these things, that these things are making serious inroads in rental housing, especially moderate income rental housing. And I just want to, we have such a housing shortage, especially after the fire. I hope we are being careful about that, because we don't want people just living under bridges. So that I did a study, a casual, not very scientific study for this, for West Company back in the early or late 80s. And we were finding that there was a fair percentage of people on the coast who just didn't have housing in the summer. They lived in the campgrounds, worked in town, and their houses went to weekly rentals because it was so much more profitable. This concerns me a little bit because we're so short now with the fire. So anyway, just want to put that out there, that I support the Airbnb and the business thing, but I think there are hidden risks there. And if we had a really massive amount of rental housing, I would feel a lot more comfortable about it.
Yeah, just to identify the other side of the coin, we're also economically deprived. So it's a delicate balance.
And perhaps
but
there's
I don't get where living under bridges helps that exactly.
Yeah. Well, there may be a nice middle ground, and
well, I just think we need to study it. I'm not opposed.
Yeah.
I just think we need to look at the big picture of that, because we know from the housing settlement, from all the kind of issues we've had over the years, that we have a radical shortage of housing in our county. And so I think we just have to make sure that we're not eating our own young here.
Chair, if I may, just understood that the item wants to come, we'll have this coming back to the commission at some point. This is getting a bit more discussion for matters than commission than I think. Okay. If you want to come back sooner for additional agendized discussion, but certainly the item will be coming back to you.
So I'm ready to change the subject. And that is, we have an approved subdivision south of town, and nothing's happening. Any insight as to why we're not getting new houses?
If I may, through the chair, it has been said out there that, well, first of all, the property in question was to go forward through to a tax sale. There's been some issues with the original developer not being able to follow through. And so there are developers that are actually looking at the site right now to take over. There is a development agreement that's keeping the project alive. It was approved under a vesting tentative map back in 2008. But I think the issue has been that this project was approved during the recession, and only now that you're starting to see close to a zero vacancy rate in the area, in the valley, that people are actually starting to look at it as, maybe this is something we ought to really look at much more seriously. So I think there is some momentum at looking at it. What I understand from folks that I talk to is that there are a lot of requirements that need to be made, and I think a lot of them deal with drainage. But then again, like with any project, you have to mitigate certain concerns. And so I think what you have is a lot of folks out there that are looking at the project. I know that the county is very interested in seeing that project build out. That is actually something that the county would like to continue to explore with developers and so on, because of the shortage of housing. And I know that because of the fires, there is a housing task group that's been looking at a number of different sites. One of the sites that they're looking at is obviously this, as hopefully somebody can pick it up. But when we talk about housing in general, the task force is also looking at probably the reuse of the Redwood Valley Elementary School on School Way as a site for housing. And so I know that there's been some discussions with the school board, and that the school board is looking at possibly selling it as a surplus site, and hopefully somebody can step in and turn it into housing. But again, the project south of town, it was developed during the recession. Now there's folks are starting to look at it much more closely. I know in our office we've had various inquiries within the last several months. What would it take to revive this thing? So
Thanks for the update. That's encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
If I could go along with that, I think it's Vineyard Crossing. Is that at the north end of town on Lovers Lane?
Yes.
Is that on the south side of Lovers Lane? Is that where the
No, this would be on the north side of Lovers Lane.
north side? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because at one time we had an application, I think it was on a rancheria reservation property, to develop up at the end of Lovers Lane on the south side. Is anybody have an update on that?
If I may, I have no update on that. There was a rezoning for that property from
okay.
an R3 and R1 rezoning. That's all that's happened.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah. So the Vineyard Crossing, how many houses do you have an idea on?
I believe it's 123 homes that would be proposed for that site.
Okay.
They want to take out Vineyard?
It would require, the project would require a general plan amendment, rezoning, a subdivision, vesting tentative map, and there is a vineyard there now.
Thank you.
Any other matters from commission?
I move adjournment.
Second.
And third.
All opposed, dead. I have enough bag clips now.